From studios at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, this is Fourth and State. In this edition, Republican Scott Klug and Democrat Tony Earl talk about their bipartisan effort to fix the debt. Hi, I'm Ernie Franzen. I'm the Associate Editorial Page Editor at the Journal Sentinel. Welcome to Fourth and State. Today we're here to talk about the looming fiscal cliff and a project called Fix the Debt to address those issues. We have with us, we're honored to have with us today, former Congressman Scott Klug, former Governor Tony Earl. Tell us what Fix the Debt is all about. But first, if you could, tell us how serious is this issue that we're facing on December 31st?
Well, Scott is very good at reciting 2 million a minute.
2 million a minute, yep.
2 million a minute. And maybe that's just too superficial, but it gives you a notion of how bad it is. And it is exponential. It's going to double in another decade or so.
This is the debt we're talking about.
This is the debt. And, of course, the more the debt grows, the more payment on the debt grows, the less government has available to spend on things like health, education, clean environment. So it's a very, very serious issue.
So we're facing this looming deadline in Washington with the fiscal cliff right now. So to sort of emphasize what Tony said, it's $11 trillion today. It'll be $22 trillion in another 10 years if we don't get it under control. It's now the largest percentage of debt in U.S. history since World War II. Mm-hmm. So Fix the Debt is really an outgrowth of the Simpson-Bowles Commission, which came forward with a bipartisan plan to fix it. Lots of prominent folks involved on the National Steering Committee. Alice Rivlin, who used to be the Director of Management and Budget in the Clinton administration, Bob Zelig, past President of the World Bank. A long laundry list of prominent Republicans and Democrats, and Tony and I are the Republican and Democrat respectively in Wisconsin, trying to get this message across to the delegation. You got to fix it, and you got to fix it now.
What happens on December 31st?
A lot of parties. But
aside from that, the next day.
Well, you know, so there's a sequestration in effect, which essentially will cut about $1.1 trillion out of the federal deficit over the next 10 years, and it'll start with $100 billion. Most of it weighed to domestic programs over defense, 700 versus 500 roughly. And if the U.S. Congress and the President can't come in an agreement, it'll essentially be an automatic 2% across the board cut for every program. That's a silly way to do it. I mean, we've really got to pick stuff that should survive and things that get cut back. And I think it means we're going to have to cut programs, we're going to have to address entitlement reforms, and we're going to have to figure out ways to come up with more revenue.
Right. It is something, it is not palatable for anybody, but it is absolutely irresponsible if we don't address it. And Scott's right. It's got to go after cuts of programs, including entitlements, and it's got to go after raising revenues. And one reason I'm delighted to have an opportunity to participate in this is because the folks who started it, Erskine Bowles and Senator Simpson, Alan Simpson, recognized it had to be done in a bipartisan way or it wouldn't get done. It had to be done in a way where both sides would have to give and give significantly. And I think that the makeup of the Fix the Debt people on the state level and the national level reflects that reality. And I'm encouraged that the way things are starting out in Washington right now, I think these folks can set the table for doing the more ambitious things down the road. But we got to get the first steps, and I hope we get the first steps accomplished in this lame duck.
Let's talk about the bipartisanship for a second. Do you think that can be done? I mean, one of the hang-ups was in the House last time, as well as liberal Democrats don't necessarily agree on a lot of these issues. Can they reach an agreement?
I think they can. I think they understand how serious it is, and I think that President Obama and Speaker Boehner could probably get something done if they could keep their most avid supporters in line. And I hope they can. I think Speaker Boehner and his comments recognizes that elections have consequences, and I think President Obama realizes that he may have won, but he can't get anything done unless he can bring along the folks on the other side.
There's a lot of reason for pessimism, but let me say I think there's a reason for optimism, because this is just simply economics. And if they don't get this deal done in the short run, it's going to tilt the U.S. back into a pretty major recession. I think that's pretty clear. Tax increases go way up, spending cuts happen pretty dramatically, and that's a formula for lots of troubles. Winston Churchill always used to say you could always count on America to do the right thing once it's exhausted other options, and I think that's where we are today.
We had Senator Dick Durbin in a couple of months ago to talk about a number of things, but one of the issues was the fiscal cliff, and he thought that a short-term deal might be made and then it'll kick it down to the summer. What do you think of that kind of schedule?
Well, I think the one key thing is if there's a short-term deal predicated on the fact there'll be a bigger deal, I do think it has to be a date certain.
Okay.
And I think just knowing the congressional calendar, it's probably got to be in late April, May, early June, because then it'll get away from everybody. And Durbin's an interesting guy. I mean, a pretty traditional liberal Democrat, but he's been involved in this gang of 8, 4 Republican senators, 4 Democratic senators in the Senate who've been working on this for a long time. I mean, I think, if the gang of 8 suddenly becomes the gang of 10 or the gang of 12 or the gang of 16, I think there's enough political gravity in the middle that I'm actually pretty optimistic, as I said earlier, they can get something done. And so when you get Durbin and Corker, who's the former mayor of Nashville, Republican senator from Tennessee, I think those are the kind of folks who live in the real world and know they just have to fix this.
This is often seen as sort of a Republican issue, almost. Republicans tend to, or at least have a reputation for tending to, emphasize this more than Democrats, and yet you're here, Durbin's involved. How bipartisan is this effort?
Oh, I think it's strongly bipartisan. I agree with the things that Scott said earlier about the consequences of our not acting, and this requires us to do this. I'm very proud of the fact that when I had the opportunity to serve as governor, I left office with a balanced budget with a tidy surplus. I was damn proud of that. It didn't come easily. I served 1 term, as a matter of fact, but nonetheless, it was the right thing to do, and I'm proud of that, and I'm proud to be in that tradition now.
Now, Fix the Debt is a national campaign, and yet you're the state chairman for Wisconsin. I think you're in 12 states, is that right?
It's at 12, it's about to be expanded,
Okay.
I think heading towards 20.
And what are you trying to do in Wisconsin?
Well, I think we're just trying to get the message out. We've had about 300,000 people go to the website and sign a petition, and of those 300,000 people nationally, 3,000, 5,000 are from Wisconsin. Okay. I think we want to send the message out to our delegation. We expect them to work together. It'd be, you think about the Wisconsin 2 senators now. It's hard to find anybody more polar opposite than Tammy and Ron.
Right.
And I think they'll have, Ron, I'm sure, will stress the need for flatter tax rates and the cuts, and I think Tammy's going to stress trying to protect some of the social programs she sees as important. But there's got to be enough middle room. I meant, this is like the old base closing commission, where we were all for closing military bases till one of them happened to be somewhere in Wisconsin, which is actually easy for us because we never had any in Wisconsin. But I mean, if you look at it, that was the only way to get things done, is when there was pain across the board, and that's the only way it's going to work this time. And entitlement programs have to be on the table. I mean, so much of the federal budget now is eaten up by Medicare, that the only way you're going to get this under control in the long run is, raising the age for Medicare from 65 to 66 or 67. And again, I think this will be something that'll phase in for people who are 60. It won't be for people who are current. And I think the second thing you'll see is discussions about some kinds of means testing, that seniors who can afford to pay more for Medicare should be paying more for Medicare.
And that's something you support too, right? The means testing?
Yes, indeed. And I want to add, in addition to what Scott has said, also, revenue has got to go up as well. Revenue enhancements, nobody wants to say taxes. Revenue enhancements have to be a part of the package as well.
So if you look, for example, that's one of the political dances that's going on right now about increasing marginal tax rates. But if you take the Romney idea about capping deductions, meant deductions only apply really if they're itemized, so they tend to go to people with more income who try to find ways not to pay taxes. And if you take the Romney idea and cap deductions, say at $50,000 a year, that gets you $800 billion in revenue over the next 10 years. So there's lots of ways to raise revenues. And I think what you can do is take a lot of those goofy incentives that are in the tax code that really don't make sense economically. I think if you close a lot of those loopholes, people will make decisions based on economics, not just trying to dodge taxes. It's what Reagan and Tip O'Neill managed to get done in the 1980s. And I'd like to think that John Boehner and President Obama can get it done this time.
All right. Well, if we can get Ron Johnson and Timmy Bolden to agree on something, that'll be an accomplishment all by itself.
Well, there's your headline. There you go.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate this. This is a longer discussion, obviously, going on, but we do appreciate the briefing you gave us today.
Thanks very much.
So thank you.